If you're a returning viewer of this channel, then chances are you saw my video detailing if I would cut, extend, or give one more year to various NFL quarterbacks. If you are not and you haven't seen the video yet, I'll leave a link to it in the description, and there will be a pop-up at the end of this video for you to click on so you can see it for yourself. Today's video will be very similar to that, but I will be using the format for current head coaches. It's worth noting that this is before the 2023 NFL season has concluded, and by the time you see this video, some of these names that I talk about may or may not have a position as a head coach in the NFL anymore. So if you're watching this in like May 2024 or some shit, and there's a name on here that you didn't expect to hear, that's why. We have 10 coaches to look at and evaluate for today. I'll be detailing if the team has improved under their leadership, declined, or if they've stayed the same for better or worse, and base my opinion off of that, as well as who they've hired to be on their staff. If you guys are new to the channel and you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also be sure to leave a comment with your feedback as well as what you might want to see me make going forward. With that being said, let's go right into it. Extend, cut, or give one more year? Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's a guy that would make you want to run through a brick wall for him. He was hired in 2021, and throughout his time in Detroit, their record has improved exponentially each season, and their offense and defense has also improved each year, with their last 2 years on offense being ran by Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator. The roster itself is solid on both sides. Jared Goff is a very capable option at the quarterback position, throwing to receivers such as Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's in the midst of a career year, as well as rookie tight end Sam Laporta, who very well might be an all-pro tight end in an era of football where the tight end position as a whole is pretty dead. Rookie running back Jahmyr Gibbs has had a very efficient season himself, establishing himself as an elite dual threat at the position, while forming a pretty formidable duo with former Chicago Bear David Montgomery. On the defensive side of the ball, they obviously have players like Aiden Hutchinson, who's just an overall beast, but someone else who they have that I really like is Brian Branch, their second-round pick from the 2023 draft, who, in his first career game, picked off Patrick Mahomes and returned it for a touchdown in a 21-20 win over the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. That is not very Mahomey. This is going without even mentioning their number one ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus. It's a very solid roster in an NFC that is strong and well-rounded as it's been in a very long time. And the unique energy that Campbell brings to the team has had this roster completely buy into him and his vision of the team. The most important part of being a head coach in any sport is having your team believe in you to the point that they would jump off of a bridge for you. And I think it's pretty evident that this Lions team would do that for Dan Campbell. And they're having success with him that the franchise hasn't seen in decades. This year, they won their first division title since 1993, as well as their best start to a season at 8-2 since 1962. For God's sake, they helped lower crime rates to the lowest the state of Michigan has seen in 50 years, and the last time the Lions were really good. My verdict would be to extend Campbell and not even think twice about it. Extend, cut, or give one more year? Matt LaFleur. This is more as a viewer of the NFL than as a Packers-hating Bears fan. Matt LaFleur is such an average coach. His play calling is average to above average, with him going inside of the top 10 and scoring once during his tenure in Green Bay, although he has been within the top 15 in every season he has been a head coach. This season has been an average one for the Packers as a whole, but it was expected by most due to the average age of their roster and uncertainty in regards to Jordan Love, who would start his first full season after sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 seasons. Love is shown to have no uncertainty at this stage and is on fire right now after an incredibly slow start, with a young and inconsistent receiving core consisting of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Tucker Kraft. Obviously, they have all reliable with their running back duo of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, even if there has been much lower production from them from either lack of opportunity or just flat out regression. And this is excluding their receiving stats, by the way, because I'm a lazy piece of shit. Their defense on paper is really good with players like Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage, Rashawn Gary, Devondre Campbell, and rookie Lucas Van Ness, just to name a few. Notice how I say on paper because they do not perform to their expectations. They are bottom 5 in total rush yards allowed, also bottom 5 in total rush yards per carry, and bottom 12 in total pass yards. A lot of that has been blamed on second-year defensive coordinator Joe Barry, and while I do think he deserves a fair chunk of the blame and should be held accountable, I also think the players themselves should have an egg on their face because Joe Barry isn't on the field playing defense. Green Bay is currently 8-8 with the chance to make the playoffs with a win this week versus the Chicago Bears. No comment. And I think regardless of the outcome of this game, you have to give Matt LaFleur one more year, at least with a hopefully more established and experienced roster. I think if they show no improvement next season, you have to consider moving on, but I think they're probably going to consider moving on either way and join the potential Jim Harbaugh sweepstakes. But if they don't end up with Harbaugh, I think keeping LaFleur for at least next season and seeing how it goes is the best move, because at this point, you don't really have much to lose. Extend, cut, or give one more year? Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen pisses me off more than words can even describe, but I'll try to verbalize it as best as I can. I said in the previous video I made about Derek Carr joining the Saints that this offense should be lights out with the supporting cast highlighted by Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Juwan Johnson. Johnson has been nearly non-existent all season despite being a preseason favorite to the point that Taysom Hill he's getting more touches on him. Olave is literally 1 yard away from passing his total from last season on 9 more receptions. Michael Thomas is still Michael Thomas and misses a shit ton of games because he has glass bones and paper skin like the dude from SpongeBob, but Alvin Kamara is still a beast, and is honestly even better this season than he was last season, and that's with him missing 4 games this season due to suspension. This offense is filled with studs, and it's 14th in the league in points per game, with the defense being 6th in points per game allowed. I expected the Saints defense to feast, and I was right to believe that, but the fact that Joe wasn't their defensive coordinator and they're doing all this is the funniest thing to me, because he was one of the worst defensive coordinators in the NFL last season with a fantastic defense in Cleveland. New Orleans still has a chance to make the playoffs somehow, despite playing some of the most uninspiring offense in the entire league considering who was on their roster. And as a part-time Saints enthusiast, I'm absolutely rooting against them for making the playoffs. And I would deadass rather see the Packers in the playoffs over them. Last season, it was more excusable with Dennis Allen and the team as a whole to be as dysfunctional as they were because they were switching between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton at quarterback with developing players. This year, while they've improved their record, this has absolutely been a disappointment in my eyes. I'm aware that he doesn't call the plays and that Pete Carmichael does that, but he has certainly done a shit job in preparing his offense for anything. Without going too harsh on Derek Carr for the sake of the follow-up video I have planned, he has the arm of my 78-year-old grandmother and goes off on his receivers for his blunders. It's no wonder that he has driven, no pun intended, 3 of his receivers to drive while intoxicated just to get away from him. Okay, that was actually really harsh. As I'm sure you could have told by the way the section of this video started, I would cut Dennis Allen as soon as the final whistle sounded off for their season. Extend, cut, or give 1 more year, Sean Payton. Sean Payton's an interesting case, because he improved the Broncos offense significantly from last season, which isn't saying a ton considering they were statistically the worst offense in the NFL last season under Nathaniel Hackett. Russell Wilson was a big part in their turnaround this season after a tumultuous season the year before getting benched this season in an instance of egos clashing within the organization. Cortland Sutton was a big beneficiary from Russ' surge, having arguably the best season of his career despite missing multiple games. Jerry Jeudy had a pretty average season, with his biggest highlight being Steve Smith Sr. flaming him on NFL Network before a game versus the Chiefs, where Jeudy felt dangerous, getting 3 devious catches for 14 total yards. While Javonte Williams is coming off of a torn ACL, averaging under 4 yards per carry, but almost reached 1K yards from scrimmage on the season. The Denver defense throughout the first half of the season looked like absolute dog shit and infamously allowed 70 points to be dropped on their heads by the Dolphins. During the second half of the season, it improved drastically and looked more how it looked last season. They are currently 8-8, which is their best record since the 2016 season where they went 9-7, but there's still 1 more game left on their schedule. While all this improvement has been excellent and a great sign for the future for the team that traded first-round picks for the man, I still need more time with Payton as the head coach before I give a definitive decision on whether he stays or goes. Therefore, I would say to give him 1 more season and see if they're able to build off of that. Extend, cut, or give 1 more year, Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator for Buffalo before last season, where he took a job to become the head coach for the New York Giants. Daboll's absence with the Bills has been felt throughout the entire team, as they were second in the league in points per game as well as total yards. He was also instrumental in helping develop Josh Allen into an all-pro quarterback he ended up becoming, which was part of the reason why the Giants hired him in 2022 to become their newest head coach. Their goal was to try to help Daniel Jones take that next step and unlock his potential as both a rusher and a passer. And while he did have a career year last year, and the Giants had their highest point per game total since 2018, and even won their first playoff game in 11 years against Minnesota, it has not translated thus far into long-term success. They are now bottom 3 in points per game, and have even regressed on the defensive side of the ball as well, averaging 3 more points per game allowed this year than last, and are averaging a near 10-point loss every single game. To give the Giants coaching staff some semblance of credit, they have run 3 different quarterbacks as the starter this season. Darren Waller has been disappointing to say the least, and their wide receiver 1 has been Darius Slayton since 2019. Saquon Barkley has been one of the very few shining lights for this team, aside from Dexter Lawrence on defense, who has been one of the very best at his position. I think it's worth noting that Daboll is not calling plays for this team like he did in Buffalo, but I don't think it would change all that much considering the talent gap between the 2 teams. In my opinion, Daboll is one of the more creative offensive minds in the NFL, and I think a better roster with more freedom would suit him perfectly. I think ultimately he's a better offensive coordinator than he is as a coach, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, a more complete roster would do him wonders, so it is hard to fully evaluate him at this stage. I would get him a proper quarterback, whether that's in free agency or through the draft, some pro-caliber receivers, some capable O-linemen outside of Andrew Thomas, as well as maybe a capable backup to Andrew Thomas, considering dude's never healthy. Also, probably a new tight end, as Darren Waller is just washed up, and he's more washed up than I even thought he was. Run with him next season, give him the reins over the offense, and long story short, I would give Brian Daboll 1 more year with that. Extend, cut, or give 1 more year, Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles was the Buccaneers defensive coordinator from 2019 to 2021, He was brought onto the staff led by new head coach hire Bruce Arians, and they would go on to win a Super Bowl in the 2020 season. After one more season following that win, Arians would step down as head coach to take the role of the senior football consultant for the Bucs, while Bowles took the head coaching job from Arians. In his first full season as a head coach for Tampa Bay, they would win the NFC South and go against the Cowboys in the playoffs despite owning an 8-9 record. They would get their asses handed to him in this game, and Tom Brady would officially retire following the conclusion of the season. Since the Bucs had nothing to lose, they signed first overall pick Baker Mayfield to play with a quality cast of receivers, including Mike Evans, who has had a 1K receiving yard season each year of his career, and Chris Godwin, who's one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. Mayfield proceeded to shock the world by having the best season of his entire career up to this point, including a career high in passing touchdowns as well as completion percentage and passer rating. This defense, led by Shaq Barrett and Antoine Winfield, were 10th in points per game allowed, but are 26th in yards allowed per game, and their pass yards allowed on the season being the most in the NFL among all teams. But yet it could be their second consecutive season of winning their division, going 8-9 and making the playoffs. Their offense is just fine. It's nothing insane, but it's more than serviceable if their defense is on. It really hasn't been this season. For a former defensive coordinator, you would think their defense at least would be locked down, but it hasn't really. That said, he's done a decent job steering the ship. I would probably get some more receiver help to take some of the load off of Evans and Godwin, but I would probably give Bowles one more year and let him go if there's no improvement. Extend, cut, or give one more year? Nick Sirianni. It's going to be insanely moronic coming from a guy making YouTube videos of talking about multi-millionaires every week, but Nick Sirianni is one of the biggest fucking losers I have ever seen in sports, player or otherwise. He's a loudmouth that can't back it up when his back is against the wall. He'll flex regular season wins over teams like the Colts, who were one of the worst teams in football a season ago, when the Eagles beat them 16-15. He flexed a regular season win over the Chiefs and told KC fans to shut the fuck up. Hey, I don't hear anymore! Despite blowing a double-digit lead to them in the Super Bowl just 8 months prior. And is just flat out an underachiever considering the fucking loaded roster he's been gift wrapped. An all-pro quarterback in Jalen Hurts, a surefire top 5 wide receiver in A.J. Brown, an ascending star in an excellent complimentary piece in Devontae Smith, a fucking Heisman winner, one of the most reliable tight ends in the game today in Dallas Goedert, and the best offensive line in football by a mile. And that's not even including a defense that's getting better every week with stars that they get given to him on a silver platter like Kevin Byard, Shaq Leonard, just to name a few. This team has not had one convincing and dominant win this season and have gotten their shit kicked in by some of the top teams in the NFC like the 49ers and the Cowboys, and they've even lost some gimmies to teams like the Cardinals, the Seahawks, and the Jets, while barely being lower-end teams like the Giants, Commanders, and Patriots. Despite all the help they've gotten on defense, they're the 4th worst team in the league in points per game allowed, and have allowed the 2nd most pass touchdowns in the league and the 5th most pass yards total. On the offensive side of the ball, Jalen Hurts has 3,800 pass yards and 23 pass touchdowns as a whole, which is obviously good on 66% completion, but he has 19 total turnovers, which is tied for 2nd most in the league among quarterbacks. Despite an 11-5 record, this team has taken an absolute tumble this season. Despite all the shit I just talked, I would still give Nick Sirianni one more season to prove that he can reach that next level. Yes, he made the Super Bowl, but a lot of coaches who have helped dominate in the regular season just to crumble when it matters most. Ron Rivera with the Panthers and Dan Quinn with the Falcons comes to mind. However, they weren't able to continue their winning ways after their losses like the Eagles have. And I have to believe that for better or worse, they bought into Sirianni. So I would say barring a legendary collapse in the playoffs this year, I would bring him back for next season. If he falls flat on his face again after talking mass amounts of shit, I would drop him like a bad habit. Extend, cut, or give one more year? Matt Eberflus. Whenever I've talked about the Bears on this channel this season, it's mostly been about the ongoing conversation on who will be their quarterback next season. But I really haven't talked much about the job Matt Eberflus has done. So here we are. I believe at one point I acted as if it was a certainty that Eberflus will be gone after this season, and I think that was just out of frustration with how the season had gone up to that point. Since that video, however, the team has turned around and became one of the hottest teams in the NFL. They've won 4 of their last 5, 5 of their last 7, and a lot of the credit has to go to Matt Eberflus for how he's turned around this defense. In their last 8 games, Chicago is averaging just 18 points per game allowed, and averaging 22 points per game offensively, which is 2nd in the NFL during that span. The turnaround on defense happened after defensive coordinator Alan Williams was let go from the team for reasons that we do not quite know yet. But whatever it is, it certainly benefited the team. This team is also one of the youngest teams in the NFL, so I also think it took a little bit for them to really mesh as a unit. Jalen Johnson has exceeded all expectations, while Tyreek Stevenson has developed nicely as the season has progressed, and Kyler Gordon making that leap that I don't think many Bears fans, myself included, expected to see at this stage. And that secondary currently leads the NFL in interceptions with 22. Their D-line, highlighted by a trade around Halloween for Montez Sweat, who has been excellent this season, with rookie Javon Dexter, the player that they drafted with the Roquan Smith pick, getting more lethal each week, which has allowed Chicago to be one of the best rush defensive teams in the entire league. Off-season signings TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds have gelled nicely, with Edmonds having a career high in both tackles and interceptions, while even getting his first touchdown in the NFL. TJ Edwards is also having one of the best years of his career, while also getting a career high in interceptions and proving himself as one of the best linebackers in the entire league. Enough about the defense, though. Let's talk about the offense, more specifically DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, who are both having career years and establishing themselves as arguable top 5 in each of their positions. And I know some people might not want to hear me talk about Justin Fields any more than I already have, but he's having a career year as a passer despite missing 4.5 games due to injury. I know people don't like to talk about hypotheticals, but he would have a 3,000 passing yard season, given their current situation is pretty solid in my eyes. This team is learning how to win, and they are currently 7-9, where most people projected them to be before the season even started. One thing Eberflus must improve on, though, is late game adjustments, because this Bears team could have been a 10-win team had they not blown 3 crucial multi-possession games in the fourth quarter of games against the Lions, the Broncos, and the Browns. It's not just on him, it's on the players for collapsing on both sides of the ball, as well as offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, but it's never just on one guy. That said, I think he's shown great improvement over the season, just like the rest of the roster. I think if they do end up keeping Fields, trading the first overall pick for a massive haul, getting a quality wide receiver too, bolstering the offensive line just a tad, especially at center, and its depth overall, get some pieces at D-line, and fire Luke Getsy as an offensive coordinator, I genuinely believe that this team will be a surefire playoff squad next season. With all that being said, I would give Eberflus one more season and have it be playoffs or bust for him. My apologies for the essay, I just really like talking about the Bears. Extend, cut, or give one more year to DeMeco Ryans. I don't think enough credit's given to DeMeco Ryans for the Texans' success this season. Most of the credit seems to be given to CJ Stroud and CJ Stroud alone, and I think he deserves a lot of it without a doubt for what he's been able to do as a rookie, with the 19th ranked offensive line in the league and his wide receiver core being Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, and Tank Dell, who was on IR. He was 14th in the league in points per game and 13th in points per game allowed, and the defense is highlighted by studs like Will Anderson, Derek Stingley, and Jalen Petrie. Houston is currently 9-7 with a chance to win the AFC South in the final week of the season. I really don't have a lot more to say in this segment. Overall, Ryans has done an excellent job with this team. He's another coach that gets the most out of his team despite their limitations. Obviously, the player deserves the bulk of the credit for their performance and elevating their stock, but Ryans has done great work when it comes to getting them ready and keeping them motivated every week. I know we're only one season into the DeMeco Ryans era, but I would extend him in a heartbeat. And finally, extend, cut, or give one more year, Doug Pederson. I already dedicated a decent chunk of time in a video I made recently talking about Trevor Lawrence, talking about how I felt about Doug Pederson. To save you some time, in the video I mentioned how Pederson brought a level of unpredictability to whatever team he went to, but he was unable to sustain it for long periods of time, as nearly right after the season the team peaks in, they immediately begin to decline. I mentioned how it happened with the Eagles after the season they won the Super Bowl, and how it's happening now with the Jaguars following their playoff win last season. I think with Jacksonville, it's much more prevalent because Trevor Lawrence was expected to be an MVP candidate this season and a surefire top 5 quarterback when in reality, he's been a turnover machine, carrying 19 of those this season, which is tied for second most in the league with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. Jacksonville has the 19th ranked defense in the NFL as well, and you wouldn't think with the roster they have, including first overall pick Trayvon Walker and star Josh Allen, the linebacker, not the quarterback. Jacksonville also started the season 8-3 on the brink of taking the number 1 seed in the AFC, just to go 1-4 since then and might even lose the division with 1 week remaining in the season. You got to go off of what benefits your franchise and its players in the long term, especially when you have a younger roster like Jacksonville has. Hindsight's 2020, and if history is good for anything, it's good to show those in the future how to not replicate its bad fucking moments, if that makes sense. You gotta trim the fat, and it took the Eagles years to do that after Doug Pederson helped hold the franchise back and continue building off of its positive momentum following a Super Bowl win in 2017. He's not the only problem on this team, but I do feel he's one of the more prevalent problems. Therefore, I would cut Doug Pederson. But what do you think? Do you disagree with any of my picks here? If so, let me know down in the comments as well as what you might want to see on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to watch the other extend, cut, or one more year video I made by clicking on the screen right here if you haven't already. And I will see you all next week. Peace out.